Log 43, day of recording. This is the 16th of August and Friday. I came back from my travels yesterday morning, and I'm going to be recapping a little bit of what I've been feeling and what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks that I've been away, and I haven't been able to physically be in the studio to continue, at least physically, the Stonemason's journey. So, as my last log, which was sort of like a pre-recorded before I travel log, or what I was feeling and I was sort of like thinking before I traveled, and I sort of said a few things on what I would expect and what I wanted to achieve from traveling. Given that it was an unexpected travel, it was a family obligation that I had to do. I had to help out on some fundamental level in a situation, and I went there as of help. And the place that I went was the UK. Funnily enough, when I went there, it was on the 3rd of August. I landed in the UK. It was a Saturday, if I am not mistaken. What I first witnessed was the riots. Now, I don't know if you heard about this. At the time that I went there were sort of an outburst of far right riots been happening in the UK. I didn't know at the time, given that I just landed there and it's just sort of begun. And the city that I was in, it was the city that I grew up in. It was the city when I was 14. I went there until I was around my young to late adult, young adult sort of life. And I was very familiar with the streets. I was very familiar with the city as I grew up in a city center, and seeing sort of like this commotion when I landed, I was a bit surprised, and it was the most electrifying and sort of like weirdly energetic in a very negative way that I felt the city to be in. I was obviously, there's always noise, but this particular outcome, there was like two different side of crowds, and they were both obviously throwing words at each other, slangs and whatnot. And the majority of what this was about conducting in a violent way the unwanted quote unquote foreigners in quote unquote their country. And it was shocking to see, because I've always, as a person who I seek um, in my life, in my young life, I seek sort of help and to leave my current situation in my country to go and get a better education, a better life, and went to the UK. I found that to be surprising, and to see how it evolved over the years. There's always obviously that a small, very small group of people who always feel sort of negative towards that, but seeing it happen in front of me in such a way was absolutely shocking. Obviously, there were police, there were violent sort of behaviors towards the crowds and how they were communicating. So it wasn't really a protest; it was literally a very physical event. And in the aftermath of that, as I made my way to the location that I was supposed to be in to help, for the reason that I came here, I started reading the reaction that people had on this sort of movement that was happening at the time. And the biggest, I guess, thing that really made me feel awful was when I saw people who were just there. They moved there for their family or for a better future, because for whatever reason. And they would literally ask other members who were sort of more native towards the city center if it was okay to go down the street and walk at night, or if they would let their wife allow them to walk at night or whatever in the situation, to have the freedom that everyone is expected to have, and have that to be sort of in a fearful manner, given that someone might harm them. It felt quite alienating to think that how we're progressing, or at least how that was progressing in the time that I was there, how scarily it has been declining, the idea of your individualism and your understanding of freedom. And it really shocked me, to be honest. It really shocked me. And for the next 3, 4, 5 days, I've been hearing and I was amongst the talks of that commotion. Obviously, the the measures that the country took to really help alleviate that were pretty substantial. They started putting people in jail that conducted such violence. And the beautiful thing about this was at the beginning, when it started, it felt like the far right, the people who were pro fascism, were a lot. But then as people were catching up and sort of like hearing what happened, the people who were more and against racism, against any form of segregation in a blatant way, they gather up and really showed to the world and the people who were in that country that were natives that the it's only the minority that exists in this sort of spectrum of feeling this type of racism. Like they really turned it around, and it was very beautiful to see. So that was the introduction of me going back to a country that I used to live there, and I purposefully avoided because I gained a lot of benefits and positives from that country, but it came to a lot of it came in a lot of expense in from pain, and in an environment where really was one of the lowest points in my life. But through them, I worked through it, and I became who I am today. So obviously, I'm not regretful of anything. It's just knowing it for what it is. So in the quest of me going there and helping out in the situation that I was supposed to help in, I had this idea that I would sort of work on my blog entry on re-advertising my flow paintings. It has been my sort of priority in this month after I finished the six compositional designs of the Stonemasons chapter 3 additional designs. I decided to sort of like take a small break, do this re-advertisement so I can potentially, if I can, sell a few more of the remaining paintings, gain a bit more financial stability to move forward and add more to the stonemasons sort of backbone on updating what needs to be updated. And I thought I was going to write some of the things that I wanted to write, given that I don't just want to use what I've done a year or two ago in the advertisement of Flow and just slap it on again and reuse it. I don't like that idea. I want to give more value to people and sort of more insights, just because I find it more interesting, the idea to learn in a deeper level anything that is sort of shown. So that was the idea, but I didn't execute on that at all. I didn't feel that I wanted to write. I didn't feel pressured by time, or as in, oh, I have to do this in this week because when I go back, that type of mentality. I didn't have that. I really wanted to sit down and think about things given the way that they were changing. I started reflecting and seeing how I grew and how the area around me grew. And honestly, how people were sort of changing from the time that I've been there. It's been in a very big decline of how they feel towards their future in that country. And I really found that fascinating, and I really wanted to learn more about it. And besides the reasonings per se and their sort of understanding of it, which is very biased, I am sure, and not everyone shares the same idea, and in no shape or form would I want to make this statement or any of the statements that I made today as the this is what's happening, take it as a factual sort of event. It was just simply my perspective and how I felt. And seeing all these newfound decline and misery in the disconnections between people was quite alarming for me. I mean, last year in September, I was there again. It was my first year back after 5 6 years have passed, and it was mostly to do with me being able to heal myself and really mend some of my trauma that I've experienced there, and it worked. I was able to do that, and it was beautiful. And now going back again without really expecting it, given that it was a family obligation that I had to do, I really took it into face value and really wanted to experience it for what it was. I didn't really have any preconceived notions or predisposed understandings on what I would feel. I just went for it and see how it was, and it really allowed me to let go of myself and how me as an individual is responding to the world, and more see the world responding to me, which I failed many times to do in my life. I realized from a young age in my emotional instabilities, I would really project them onto situations, meaning that if I was feeling predisposed in a negative or in a sort of angry manner, I would see in a situation, sort of like choosingly see a negative connotation that was happening, even though someone else might have seen something positive in that situation, in that sort of picture, that composition that life sort of throws at us, or the situation or whatnot. And this time around, I really wanted to take a step back, allow myself to just exist without having to put myself in front and really take the big and the full picture, really take it all in, really understand and comprehend what was going on. And it was quite informative because I think it was the first time, or what it seemed to be the first time that I was doing that. I didn't really have the idea that I should feel a certain type of way and I should sort of apply myself in these questions, but I just saw the questions for what they are. And I started sort of putting things together in understanding why they're that way based on other people's sort of movements and behaviors. And it felt quite healthy. It felt quite alleviating of my burdens that I felt were bestowed upon me when I was going to relay whatever I was witnessing. It felt quite unfamiliar, but in a very good way. And thus, it was interesting to comprehend all that and really ponder that mindset into the stonemason's mindset. Because in the stonemason's mindset, in this individual that I created in the story, he filtered life through his own understandings. And obviously there is some factual things that happened, but we are seeing it from his perspective. But at the same time in the story, the way that the narration is sort of done, you see a common perspective that is being understood throughout history, and how the individual that I've created, this fictional character that I've created in this set of examples, how he behaves, how he interacts, and in his interaction and behaviors, what his solutions were towards him. And it was very interesting to ponder that and really have a sit and think about the depth that I want to introduce this character in. And interestingly enough, the area that I was in, which was a little bit outside of the city center, this town there, was how I imagined and sort of was inspired about the visual of the tower, sort of where the understanding of this tower on this hill that overlooks the town, and it's very isolated and it's very disclosed from human interaction, and sort of detached from society. It was literally overlooked, and overlooking this sort of town that I was in on this hill. I think I'm going to be sharing a picture there. I think I've taken some pictures, although they might be blurry given the distance. I'm going to be sharing with you the visual that I've been having as I was sort of giving birth to this visual concept of this character, and the idea that I wanted to have in mind. And every day that I would wake up and I would sort of go down that road, I would see it on that hill. I would always imagine how that's where the stonemason was living, and I would think what his sounds were like, or how he would feel when he would look outside of his window and see all this bustling crowd bursting around, and this in incessant noise that would sort of reverberate around the town and his tower. And there was a lot of ponderings and a lot of sort of daydreaming about it, given now that I have physical drawings and visuals into the inside of the tower. I began sort of visualizing it, and really taking the sort of imaginary journey inside of this tower that we're going to do inevitably in the story anyways. Because the point is that for the first time in many, many decades, you're able to go into his tower and really see what was happening and who this person was, and at the same time read and understand him in a deeper level that nobody else knew him, because some things are very personalized that you don't say. But when you find these personalized sort of traits depicted and documented on objects that weren't meant to really be public, but at the same time they were meant to be said, but they never were said, you begin to have this intimacy that once existed but never were shared. And I really like that idea, and I find that incredibly powerful in this specific story that I'm attempting to tell. And in general, my week really rolled by in this manner. I was helping a lot, and really being present in the obligation that I had to, and in the remaining time that I had to myself, I was either reading and catching up on the reading material that I need to do for the story, and the expression that I want to sort of like capture, and the ponderings on how I feel and how the world is around me, and my perception, and how skewed my perception is based on my emotions, which is very interesting, because this fundamental understanding towards the end of what I just said, the your perspective is skewed by your emotional stability, really will be present in the stonemason story. Because for you, when you witness what you're going to be witnessing, it might have a tone that the stonemason's words and mindset doesn't really collide in a similar way. Because it's different to leave something in a first person and say it as a first person. It's a very different conclusion when you witness it as a third person, and as the person who weren't really attached to this, or didn't have the inclination to sit down with this as much as this person did. And I think many things in life do work that way. That's why we have gaps of relating to people, is because sometimes we haven't remotely felt their pain or their joy or their any emotion, and we try to comprehend it in the limited way that we feel an emotion or the situation that they were in, and whether judge them as being too eccentric, or too incredibly shallow, or any emotion that we like to simplify in to understand a situation. And that was beautiful to have as a perspective, this newfound perspective moving forward, because I was able to sort of take a step back, sit down, and reflect. And if anything in this story and in this new chapter in my life, meaning this new chapter of again taking a personalized theme that is very different than my previous one, the only thing that is prevalent and always sort of appears to be true is by taking the necessary breaks from it, we move forward in progressing both as an artist and as a human, because we sit down and really allow the emotions that we're feeling to set in, and really allow them to take place, and their progress to be felt. And I'm quite honored to be able to do that, and to be able to have the time to do that in this theme that I couldn't before. Regardless, putting an end to this sort of traveling mindset and how I was thinking, this week I'm going to be working on writing the flow sort of remaining backbone of the blog. And I think I can easily do this towards this week. And if I have the time, I would love to see the three major designs of the first arc and really redo them in Photoshop, sort of at the interesting understandings that I can carry through from the previous designs on how I collage things and how I depict storytelling in through the environment. So I need to do that, which I'm very excited to be honest. Now that I have this newfound understanding on how, and these new skills on how to do this properly, or at least closer to what I feel is the source of how I wanted this to be depicted. It's exciting for me. So this week will be spent in writing the flow blog, and if I can release it by the week after, or at least have a date that I wanna do that, and really reintroduce that. And as soon as I do that, it's back to the Stonemasons story and completing the three major designs. So yeah, this is my mindset after a brief break and a brief change of environment, a massive change of environment, both in climate and in people and in mindset. So it was a very interesting parenthesis in this journey that I feel it only adds to it. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I will be talking to you on the next week with my new understandings and my new sort of progress, and hopefully it's going to be interesting or beneficial to the bigger picture. Until then.